The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Hi everybody, how you doing? And thanks for coming back to another episode of the Piercing Wizard podcast. In just a minute, I'll go ahead and get into an interview with Tais Fernandes. I've met Tais in several different countries at this point, but they're active in Sweden right now. They have a long history though, so I'll let them kind of tell their story as we get into the interview. I want to remind everybody that I have a seminar open for registration right now. February 2nd, 2025, I'll be doing a full-day seminar in Indianapolis, Indiana. A bunch of different information. You can go ahead and get verified and sign up or just get more info about the classes at ryanpba.com. Or if you want to speed up the process, just go ahead and email me at ryanpba@gmail.com and I'll get you set up. I also just published a new video on patreon.com/RyanPBA showing 3 different versions of triple helix piercing. One version is with internally threaded jewelry, one version is with threadless jewelry, and one version is with rings. So I get to show a lot of different information, a lot of different methods and technique and logic that goes into it. I'm publishing this episode on, it should be December 23rd, 2024, and that means that today is the day that Lola arrives in the U.S. So really excited to take her work visa out for a spin. Obviously, she'll be here with me for the holidays too, but I'm really excited to see Lola get to pierce in the States. So looking forward to that, and I imagine that we're going to be recording some content for you while she's here on the trip. We did get all your submissions for that Ask Us Anything episode, so we're kind of rolling that into an end-of-year episode too. So for now, let's go ahead and get into this interview with Tais Fernandes. So I want to welcome you to the show, and a problem of mine very often when I invite people on to talk on the show is I forget to ask them to introduce themselves. So before we get into a conversation, please just give me an introduction for yourself.
Well, hi. First, thank you for having me in the show. It's really special for me to be a part of it. My name is Tais Fernandes. I'm originally from Brazil, but I have been living in Sweden, in the cold north of Sweden, for almost 13 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time. And I have had my own shop for 4.5 years. Yeah.
So out of curiosity, what made you move from Brazil to Sweden?
Okay, so here's the thing. I didn't move from Brazil to Sweden. I was living in Italy for a while. But anyway, I moved here because my partner is from Sweden. So yeah, basically that's it.
Okay.
The reason why I moved here.
So if you have that mentality of a piercer who's seen things on different continents, because you've been in the States too, and you bounce around a fair amount. What's it like seeing that perspective and that arc? Like, could you imagine when you were living full time in Brazil that you would end up owning your own studio and owning it in Europe and all the different things you're doing now? Like, what do you think younger piercer Tais would think of it?
Oh, no. I mean, I would never imagine, opening my own shop. That was like a really crazy idea, like, no, that's not possible. It's just like for, other people, but not for me. If you would tell me like 5 years ago or, 6 years ago that, yeah, you're gonna own your own shop and, it's gonna be, difficult, but really amazing. I don't think I would have believed you. But yeah, I think it's, it has been, of course, challenging, but I wouldn't change it for the world, really.
Were you piercing professionally when you were in Brazil?
No. I started mostly in Italy. But here's the thing, I started back in 2009, but I don't say that I have been piercing since 2009 because when I moved to Sweden, I took a break of several years because, life happened. I was not forced, but I had to, focus on other things. But by the end of my last year of university, I I wasn't connected with myself really. I was like, what do I really love doing? What am I passionate about? So I finished my degree. It has nothing to do with piercing. It's linguistics. It was nice, but it's piercing that I really love doing and I'm so passionate about.
So if you've studied linguistics, this is a question that I like to think about. I meet so many piercers who are very international. They speak several languages. They've maybe lived in several countries. I'm always curious, like when you maybe have like your first language and then you learn other languages, like which languages do you think in and which languages do you dream in?
I would say in my case, English, really.
Yeah.
I mean, at work, my most of my clients are Swedish, and even though most people in Sweden do speak really good English, I speak Swedish with them. Of course, I have international clients as well. If you check like my Instagram, for example, I do post everything in English because I try to accommodate for most people, and most people that follow me, I speak English. But yeah, my brain works mostly in English, even though
Yeah,
it's
it's
not my
it's
mother
funny how
tongue.
that's kind of the international language, and I think it's even funnier that in a way it's the international language because that's the language of television.
Yeah.
When I went over to Sweden, I did a short guest spot at Federal years ago, and the
Mhm.
owner, Jovan, had such a good English accent that I thought he was American for years because he learned English from watching American television. So I think it's funny, like when I meet people that are in different countries, they have their first language and their beautiful accent with that. But a lot of times when people speak English, they speak like American English or British English or whatever because of the television that they watched.
Yeah, I mean, it's when it comes to language in Sweden, I think that one of the things that contributes so much to so many people speaking good English is the fact that, basically nothing is dubbed. It's,
Hmm.
just with like subtitles. So people have that connection. And of course, like culturally as well, heavily influenced by, American movies, American TV, American culture in general. So yeah.
Do you ever find that there's difficulty communicating with clients about some of the really specific like piercer terms? Like if some of the piercer terms are, American English or any other terms, do you ever have difficulty translating that into something that translates well in Swedish?
Not anymore, I would say. But in the beginning, is that word that you know exactly what you mean, and there is no direct translation. But I think that's when my linguistics, brain comes into place and finds not a replacement, but something that, delivers the message in the same way, even though it's not a translation.
Yeah, like sometimes when I have clients come in that are traveling or when they have a different first language, if I say phrases like downsizing, sometimes those don't always translate well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one term like downsizing, for example, is a word that I use just in English, really. But when I notice that the client, I'm not so sure that this person got what I meant, then I just, with a short explanation in Swedish, and it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. I wish that I had stronger language skills. Like some Americans had education through primary school, Spanish, Italian, French, whatever, but I didn't have that. I went to like technical schooling, so I was learning to be an electrician. I was going to like trade schools and stuff for my primary years. So I didn't have the same kind of academic education with like languages and music and different things like that. And I kind of regret it later in life because there are loads of times where I wish that I had some skills with German, some skills with Spanish, some skills with Portuguese, because of traveling and instructing, and I've tried, but I just don't think that I have the adult brain that's as
Hmm.
receptive to language learning. So I'm always really jealous when people have strong language skills.
Yeah, I mean, specifically when it comes to as an attendee perspective, I mean, I end up talking to people regardless, like at conferences. I like to, get to know people, understand, their reality and, sharing and all of that. I noticed that specifically in countries where English is not so common, for example, in Brazil, uh, speaking both languages, Portuguese and English, it helps me help other people too. For example,
Yeah.
I attended GEP in Brazil this year, and I was able to, of course, during classes they have translators and everything. It's an amazing event. You have been there, you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
But also like helping translate, conversations, like between classes, helping, two people that wouldn't otherwise be able to communicate and learn from each other. And that's really nice to be able to do that for other people too.
Yeah. Uh, we'll talk a little bit more about the APP board election as we get into this, but something that Lola brings up pretty often is that the APP is such an American central organization. Like it does serve piercers around the world in different countries, but a lot of the standards are based on American standards, and a lot of the communication is based on American speech patterns and things like that. So I think having organizations where you can have people with that international flair, whatever country it might be, is really beneficial because now the APP is this massive organization that has members everywhere. So I think that we need to see more representation on committees and boards and classrooms for those international piercers.
Yeah, I think it's important to, of course, there is nothing wrong with, having the majority, of maybe members and even board members from the US. I mean, it's an American-based organization. Yeah, I do agree with you. It's important as well to, as membership grows outside the US as well, to bring new perspectives because other communities and other realities are also being, part of the APP now.
Yeah.
Something that perhaps wasn't the case a few years ago. And it's great. I'm so happy to see the organization growing, Even here in Sweden, for example, at the moment, I think last time I checked, I'm the only member in the country. But as I always say, I don't want to be the only one. I want more people to join the APP and to understand the importance, why it actually matters.
Yeah, I think that the information goes both ways, where I think when you have a diverse membership base, it really helps to strengthen the organization. So having it be
Definitely.
primarily American piercers, I don't see that changing, because you have all these other sister organizations around the world and all those things that are more intended for the local market, the local country. But I think having those international people involved in the APP makes it stronger and makes it more welcoming. And there are loads of countries out there where they might have that one member, but I really like that those members seem to be ambassadors. Like I'm sure that you're
Oh
sharing
yeah.
information about what the APP is, and just
Ah
like
yeah.
Jason D'Souza being the only member in India, I'm sure is spreading a lot of information there. And at one point, Lola was the only member in all of Scotland, and you share that information, and then other piercers start to feel more comfortable, and then they join, and the organization just gets stronger and stronger. So that's great.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't think it's a matter of like replacing American piercers. No one is, wants to do that. I think it's more like adding other perspectives, like
Yeah,
adding to the organization. Also, like understanding how the APP can help, how the APP can make a difference. And I'm not even talking about, this because I'm running, in the elections for the board. But I do think that, it's just something that will make the organization even better for everyone,
yeah, yeah, I agree.
stronger.
So my memory is awful. Like I definitely recall during the pandemic years, especially during 2020, I was trying to do online classes and webinars and like, online Pearson meetups and stuff, and
Yeah.
I would always see your name on all
Oh,
those
yeah.
sign up lists. Was that really our first interaction, or had we interacted or met before that?
No, we actually met at BMX in 2019.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I bugged you quite a bit at BMX. Like, what do you think about this? About this and that piercing. I remember we sat down like just outside the venue, and you were, like giving me tips and feedback, and that was really special for me.
Great.
Actually, you and Kale were the first APP members that I got to meet like in person, and you
Yeah.
were both really sweet. So that was really great.
I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of sent to conferences sometimes. Like the APP has their list of senior instructors and international instructors and all that stuff. So I've been really fortunate in the opportunities that I've had to be a representative for the APP and teach classes and stuff. But that's one of the reasons why I want to be at all these conferences. Like teaching the classes is great, but that's only an hour or an hour and a half. But my favorite thing about conferences is just meeting people and sitting down and having conversations and giving them the confidence to keep moving forward. Because I think a lot of times, if it's the first time you're interacting with like an APP member or an instructor or something like that, you might have this, I don't know, subconscious intimidation factor. And then to see
Yeah.
that it's like, oh yeah, they're just a person and a piercer who's like working on it. Like that's really important to people. It was important to me when I was earlier in my career, is talking to instructors and realizing that they're just human beings and they just want to help and share information. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, from a person that has been in that kind of position. I mean, I'm always pushing myself regardless, but as a person that, has been in the position of, like I'm piercing in a small town, I didn't have a lot of, like contact, everyday contact with a lot of piercers back then. Seeing how you and Kale interacted with me and with, everyone else, of course, but specifically with me, like that first contact, because you both had a class, and then we stayed and chatted a little bit after your class, like how you handled the situation and the questions. Like there was, not that no ego, no, it's just, piercers passionate about piercings and, like sharing information. That interaction was really special to me.
Well, uh, I appreciate how engaged you are, and I've seen it's kind of a recurring theme. I think it's like sometimes when you meet those piercers at conference, you can tell that they're going to grow into maybe a mentorship position or something else. Like you meet somebody early on in their career, and you're excited to see where their career takes them. And in that short period of time, I've seen a lot of growth from you. We're Facebook friends and all that stuff. Industry
Thank
colleagues.
you.
And you were an APP scholar, which I think is like a really cool thing to see someone progress into. So to touch on that like shortly, what was that experience like for you?
I remember hearing people talking about the legacy scholarship before I applied, and it's like it's gonna change your life, and it's gonna be great. But you fully understand once it has happened. Like it's saying it was an amazing experience is kind of an understatement,
Hmm.
because it was more than that. It opened so many doors. I got to meet so many like really amazing people and have opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise, you know. So I think it's an experience that I really, really hope that more and more people will, be interested in having, like specifically because with the legacy scholarship, you get to volunteer as well, and you get to, get more involved in the organization. And one thing that I want to just mention, like you don't have to be a member to apply for that scholarship.
Right.
That's one thing that I have, seen like in, online forums, like, oh, but I'm not a member, I can't apply that. Yes, you can. And that can lead to you being a member later on, if you want to, of course, because that was the case for me. I became a member because of the opportunities that I had thanks to the scholarship.
Yeah, I love being part of the scholarship process. Now there are so many different scholarships out there. Different communities have their own scholarships, and companies are supporting people getting there and all that stuff. And that's a really important distinction to make between the other scholarships and the APP scholarship. Sometimes when people go to conference on a scholarship, if they go on some sort of a community scholarship, Pierces of Color or any other like privately funded community scholarship, it's great because they're there usually with that community together with multiple scholars, but it doesn't have that same volunteering aspect. I think when you do specifically the APP scholarship, it's a fantastic opportunity for a piercer that wants to go to conference and learn. They all are. Just being at conference is a fantastic
Yeah.
opportunity in itself. But I think when you get that role of being able to be one of the APP legacy scholars, it's really seen as kind of scouting in a way because a lot of those scholars go on to be members, as you said, but also members of committees and regular volunteers at conference. And then lots of them have gone on to be board members. You know, Christina Outland, I remember, was a scholar, and you know now she's doing great things with the board, and it's a fantastic opportunity. So just while we're on the subject, I want to remind people that right now is scholarship application season. So if anyone out there is interested in it, just like you said, you don't have to be an APP member. You just need to be a body piercer. But go to the website, go to safepiercing.org, go to the conference section, and then read up about the scholarship and apply because, like you say, it can really change your life and your career.
I mean, I want to just, remind people that are listening and may be interested in applying, like, send me a message, like an email. Like, if you want to know more specifics about my experience, I'm here and I'm really glad to share my experience. If you have any questions and how it's like, because I mean, I could go on and on talking about being a scholar and how amazing it is, really. But going back a little bit to the other, like, I think people facilitating education, the APP, but also like the other scholarships, I think that's really amazing. Of course, like how your conference will be different because with the APP scholarship, you're going to be working. You're going to be, of course, volunteering, but you're going to be working.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy to see more and more like opportunities, more and more scholarships, because I mean, of course, education is so important, and
Yeah.
seeing more people interested as well. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think last year, or actually for this year of 2024, it was the year with most applications for the Legacy Scholarship.
Yeah. Yeah. By a large margin, it's had its ups and downs. You know, I've been part of the scholarship committee for I think more than 10 years at this point, and sometimes we get a load of applications, and sometimes we get just one or two more than the available spots. So it's great to see strong interest in it. It is also great to see all the other scholarships because the APP only has the funding set aside for 8 scholars, which might seem like a lot, but when you compare it to maybe 25 or 30 people applying for those scholarships, they seem a little bit more scarce. So it is great to be able to have some sort of a backup because in those years where we're picking 8 people, that means we have to say no to a lot of people, unfortunately. And a lot of those people are still strong applicants. So we like to be able to nudge them towards, well, hey, have you thought about these other community scholarships? So it's fantastic to see that support for people that want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, especially when we think about the financials, the financial part of attending a conference, for people everywhere, it's everyone makes sacrifices to attend a conference, and to be able to receive help when you really need help to achieve that thing in your career, that goal in your career. Um, it's just like I'm so grateful,
Mhm.
And it's actually one of the reasons why I want to, continue being involved in the APP, and I want to be more involved in the APP and help make that difference for other people too.
Yeah. Well, that's a great motivation. So, you know, after after you achieve that scholarship, I still see you really active with conferences and education and stuff. So do you feel like you're going to transition more into maybe an instructor role, or do you think you'd feel more comfortable in more of a mentorship or committee work role? Like what interests you behind the scenes of piercing?
Uh, Both of what you just said. I feel like I have that this thing inside of me that wants to, like share what I know. Of course, continue learning. No one knows everything. Uh, we can always learn more and, evolve as a piercer and, of course, as a person as well. I do have ideas, for classes, so I'm starting to, talk to instructors and design ideas as well. I have sent my first suggestion
Yeah.
for, yeah. Um, but yeah, becoming a mentor, um, definitely as well, because, it's that thing of me that I want to guide people. I want to help them get most of, for example, conference. Um, Share as well what I have learned because I think that uh, actually I don't think I'm sure that for me as a person, like the knowledge that is inside of my head, I don't want it to just stay here. I think knowledge is
Yeah.
something that should be shared.
Hmm.
um, and that's a great way to learn as well. I mean, you have been instructing for a long time. So you can say that, if you don't agree with me, but teaching is also a really good way of learning.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is just like you said, no one can know everything. And that's equally true or maybe even doubly true for people who are instructing classes because they instruct kind of the way that they prefer to pierce. So I've done classes before, like as a good example, when I teach a septum class, I lean a lot towards clamps because that's my favorite way to pierce septums is using clamps.
Mhm.
So every time I teach a class that's about septum clamps, I always get people that come up and they're like, "Well, what about this and what about that?" And I always try to tell them like, "You should write a class on it. If your preferred way is freehand or telescoping or whatever, but mine isn't, that doesn't mean that attendees should only get my perspective. That means that someone else should write a class on their perspective so everybody can see the different sides of it. And that's how piercers grow the most because I sat in loads of classes where it made perfect sense the way they were doing it, but then when I tried it, it didn't work for me. So I like to see other people write their own class and deliver their version of the same idea.
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to share, like to combine knowledges, and then you share your perspective on your take on what you have learned also from other people. I
Yeah.
think that for me the idea of teaching and perhaps becoming an instructor and all of that has started, like being stronger in me in the past year or so because I have been able to attend more conferences, and it
Hmm.
all started. I mean, the APP conference in 2023 wasn't my first conference. It was BMX in 2019. Um, but since then, I realized, that I gained so much as a peer and as a person that I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go and attend conference in 2024. I don't know
Cool.
how 2025 will be yet. I have plans, of course, but I started talking about that because the more I watch classes from other instructors, both online but also now in person, it's like, wait a minute, maybe I can share this thing about how I do things with other people
Yeah.
because you know very well how it is. You learn in class, but when you are at the conference, you also learn a great deal, in between classes when you're just talking to people.
Yeah, that's some of my favorite stuff is just sitting down with people and chatting, and then they'll say like some random quick thing that they're not even really thinking about, like, oh yeah, I do this. And then you're like, that blows my mind the way that you do that. Like I've learned so many things from just casual conversations. I've learned in classes too, obviously, but I think I've learned the most from just chatting with
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
So, if there was a conference that you haven't already attended anywhere in the world? Like there are so many conferences now. Do you have maybe a dream conference that you would like to go to one day?
LBP in
Yeah,
Mexico.
cool.
Uh,
What draws you to that one?
I think that there is so much going on in, when it comes to jewelry, but also like a lot of work that has been put into, LBP in general as an organization. And I just admire that so much. But also, of course, like the culture, the people there have met in these conferences that I have attended, like everyone has like only positive things about that conference.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed that I can attend it in 2025. Um, but yeah, I had, a really big goal of attending GP in Brazil, which I did this year.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I mean, you have been there, you know how it is. It's a great, 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 great event in so many
Yeah,
ways.
it's it's tough because on one side I always want to praise the conference because the conference is so many different things. It's the attendees are such a big part of it and the instructors and the organizers and everything. But I also really want to single out the organizers because almost all of these conferences are put together by a really small team, 5 people
Yeah.
maybe 10 people if they're lucky. And something like Brazil, something like LBP, it's the core of the organizers who kind of create the vibe and pull in that community that creates these incredible events. So I always want to give them their respect where it's due because the conference organizers are really where the magic starts, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is with I mean, you have attended way more conferences than I have, uh, but I do think that it's great to see as well, like conferences is starting in places where there were no educational events before as well.
Yeah,
We have APP Benelux, for example, had their first conference this year, and it's so good to see that happening,
yeah,
more
yeah.
more people interested in having organizing conferences, but also more people interested in attending these conferences.
Yeah, it's really cool. I would imagine within the next few years we'll see even more. So I'm excited. Maybe I can get a couple more stamps on my passport.
For sure. You will for sure.
So um it's board election season, and I think by the time this episode comes out, the election results will start to be tabulated or even announced. But I always really appreciate when people accept their nomination because I think sometimes people turn down their nomination because they kind of feel like I would like to do it, but maybe this isn't the right year for me, or whatever other reason. But I know there's always a lot of thought that goes into the people that accept their nominations, and I'm always really proud to see the people who are confident enough in themselves and feel like they're in the right place with their career, their studio, their personal lives, where they can accept it and move forward. And whether somebody gets it or doesn't, or goes on to do committee work or goes on to do whatever they do with these organizations, I think it's really good to see uh, generations of piercers staying engaged with the organization. So, what was it like for you getting nominated, and what was your thought process about it?
Uh, First of all, I really didn't expect it. I remember when I opened my email, I had just come home from work, and I opened my email, was sitting on this like, on my living room, and I was just like, what's going on? What is this? And my partner was in front of me. He was like, what's going on? What's happening? I was like, I was just like, no, it's not happening. Like this didn't happen.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was shocked, in the most amazing way, of course. But I didn't accept it in like immediately because I wanted to, let that sink in, and I wanted to do my research. And when I say research, I mean like reading a lot more than than I previous have done, but also like talking to board members, current board members, previous board members, people that have been um, volunteering for the APP longer than I have, to know what it's like, about their experience, if they think I'm a good fit, for example.
Yeah.
And like I told all of them, like I wouldn't take it personally if you think that I don't, because yeah, it's a huge responsibility. I mean, just being nominated is already a really huge honor for me. If you think that, I attended my first APP conference in 2023. I became a member this year. And while I think that some might think like it's too early for her, I don't think so because I feel ready to, take out the challenge that I know it will be. But it's equally an honor to, serve the organization and, help make a difference.
Yeah, well, just like we've been talking about all these different perspectives and how they make a stronger unit, it's the same thing with the board. It's like if you're an APP member for 1 year or an APP member for 10 years, like you're both still trying to be the best piercer you can be. It's important to share all those perspectives. So I think that the biggest thing for people that want to join the board isn't how long they've been a member. It's just that they want to contribute and they want to volunteer
Yeah,
that time. Like I'm not crazy about the people who might want to be on the board for more ego driven, reasons like, oh, I'm gonna tick this thing off on my bucket list. I think it's more important to be there and to get to work and to try to help and grow the organization and make a stronger community. And you seem like that kind of person because the whole time I've known you, you've been constantly engaging and re-engaging and growing and trying to share that information you got through your engagement. And that's really what I like to see in people that volunteer and people who run for the board is like, what are you going to do with that opportunity? Like people can scoop up that opportunity. I've seen loads of people get elected to the board and they only get 1 year into it and then they resign or they, whatever, they realize that it's not for them. But some other people really use the opportunity to share and to help grow the organization and all that stuff. And I would imagine you would probably fall into that category.
oh, thank you. Thank you. And, when I was talking to um, board members and previous board members, not a few, but I wouldn't be able to tell you a number. But anyway, some of them did talk about, it's not an ego thing, like applying, and becoming a board member. It's not for your ego. It's for, serving the organization, serving our community, and actually making a difference. And honestly, like that thought about, accepting the nomination for an ego reason, it hadn't crossed my mind before I started talking about this. Like, wait, do people do that? You know? So yeah, I applied because I want to contribute, like I said, and I want to help the organization um, stay relevant, make a difference for our community.
Yeah. Well, that's a great motivation. So something that we talked about a little bit, like when people come on the show, in the lead up to it, I'll usually ask them like, is there anything on your mind or is there anything you wanted to talk about? And one of the ideas you had was talking about being a piercer in kind of like a small town, a small city, an area without like a large population, and how you make a healthy business there and how you stay engaged with the community that you're piercing. So like I I've been in I'm in a well-established business. My business has been open for 24 years this year.
It's amazing.
So it we have a good reputation. People will very often come in because of that reputation. But I do remember that first 5 year period, 10 year period when we were still kind of new and people didn't really know who we were and what we were doing. And I'm in a small city. It's less than 100,000 people. Um, Everybody pretty much has to drive to get here. I don't have reliable public transit that would get you here from other cities. So it was a little bit challenging to grow the business initially. So what are some of the things that you would want to talk about with your studio, with your strategy, or things that you would want other piercers in small towns to be thinking about?
Well, some time ago, I started, really thinking about this subject. Like, what is it like for people that are in similar situations that I am? So I actually created a Google questionnaire, and I posted it online, and some, piercers also answered, and I got some really interesting answers. And when it comes to like, oh, how is it to have a studio and to pierce in a small town? The first thing is, what is actually small?
Yeah.
Because small, in my case, just to give you some perspective, and I actually checked this before we started. uh, right now in my town, in the main part of town, it's 36,000 people. In the entire area is just over 78,000 people.
Okay.
So that's what I mean when I say small.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I think
really,
my town is maybe 90,000, so a little bit
yeah.
bigger, but like as a good example, when I talk to Lola, who's in Glasgow, it's a totally different concept.
The thing with me, when I decided that I wanted to have my own studio, from day one, like from when we were designing the place, like the layout, and when we were looking for a location, and when I say we, it's because I have two business partners,
Yeah.
tattooers, but I wanted a place where I have, of course, a piercing room, uh, you know, space for, what I needed space for, but also like I wanted to bring quality to a place where piercing is somehow still seen as, an extra thing that people that have other occupations will do,
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
saying
like
that you
people who
can't.
do tattoos or people who do like hair or nails, they'll just do piercing
Yeah.
on the side.
And it's like, oh, I have seen so many like ads for, piercing courses, for example. It's like, oh, just add to your revenue. You're gonna make more money in between clients. It's like, wait a minute, that's not piercing. Like, what is it about? Piercing, it's a thing of its own.
Yeah.
They wanted to help people in this part of the country to really start to understand, like, what is quality jewelry and why does it matter. So when I was, with all the planning to open my own shop, I had that in the back of my head, and I literally had like the APP checkup list for
Hmm.
membership. It's like, okay, what can I do right now?
Yeah.
To attend, to be able to achieve that goal of becoming a member later on. But what is doable now? Because what I think, not only, to become an APP member, but one thing that I believe a lot of people do is like, oh, I can't, carry only those brands and I can't operate in that level. But don't let that stop you from doing what's doable now. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just like one change or two, but later on you're going to be able to, evolve and, do more things later on. And
Yeah, I think people can get overwhelmed with it. Like when you look at the
totally,
checklist, I don't think the checklist is anything too crazy, but when you see all those multiple points, it might seem difficult to achieve. But just like you said, just try to there are loads of piercers and loads of shops where they can already do several of those small improvements, just moving something to a different part of the room
yeah.
or, layout, small stuff. And all those little things, if you tick off maybe one thing every couple of weeks or every couple of months, eventually you're going to be through the majority of that list. And then you might just be ready for membership.
And I mean, not saying that you have to be a member to be a great piercer and, carry, do a quality job. And not saying that. I'm mentioning membership because that was a goal that I had,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but doing all of that in a small town, I think that does make things more difficult because of, all the difficulties, and doing that in a small town when you are a solo piercer,
Yeah.
it's, you know, in a way it's good because you are the person making the decisions, but it also, if you are not in a position that you have a lot of money and you can do all those changes at once, yeah, it's going to take time, and you're going to have a lot of patience, and you're going to have to, be really focused. Not
Yeah,
only to become a member, but to be able to evolve in general, like keep that motivation going. It
sure.
it does take more. I would say it does take more, not more effort, but more energy.
I pierced for probably 10 years before I was a member, and it always seemed like this it seemed like an impossible goal. And then as I was doing something kind of like what you're describing, like do a little bit at a time, you don't have to do everything overnight. After a while, that goal seemed a little bit less impossible and it seemed achievable, but it took time and it was a plan and everything. So I don't want piercers out there who are doing their best and trying really hard to think that, well, if you haven't gotten to membership yet, that you're not good, because I know loads of good piercers who are just like they're working towards it as a goal. So it is important to just keep your goals in mind, and keep moving forward on them. But at the same time, like, yeah, it's not something that a lot of shops are going to be able to do overnight.
Yeah, and I mean, some shops will, of course, like do like great quality work and all of that. And for some reason, they might not be interested in becoming a member, which is something that I'm hoping to change here, because we do have great piercers in, for example, Stockholm, and all of that. And, and I want to make sure that I'm not the only one in the entire country, so to speak,
Yeah.
and help share. The thing is, becoming a member, what I have noticed in specifically in a small town that hadn't had, like quality jewelry, for example, before. And I'm telling you this because I have heard this from loads of people. Uh, is people start to understand why quality actually matters. People start to actually see the difference.
Yeah.
And then people start to talk to their friends, their family, and then their friends and their family come to you to get something done, or to, get new jewelry and all of that. And that helps, people like the general public, not piercers, but the general public, to understand what piercing can actually be and what it's actually about.
So what are some of the things that you would do to educate local clientele that might not know what internally thread jewelry is, or implant certified materials and things like that? How do you begin that work to educate the client base?
One of the things that I believe is really important is to understand that even what is obvious for me as a professional body piercer is not obvious for the general public, potential clients, sometimes even for other piercers. So, for example, really understanding that, yes, there are thousands of posts online about, the difference, for example, between externally threaded and internally threaded jewelry, but I'm going to make my own. Like if one person sees this post, like for example on Instagram, and understands the difference, mission accomplished for me. So what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to try to educate your entire community at once. You step by step, little things, one post here, one post there. And sometimes I post about the same thing, but in different ways,
Hmm.
because different people will need that information delivered to them in different ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have been really active, especially on my Instagram, to post some stories. For example, even if I'm doing the maintenance of my autoclave, like I understand that most clients don't really care about that, but it's good for them to know, like, wait, she's doing that because, okay, that sounds good, you know.
Yeah.
But then they see it the next time I talk about it, and then they start to understand more and more and more, you know. So I think like those small steps is something that I really try to focus on.
Yeah. That's great because just like the member checklist thing, if you try to do everything at once, it's so intimidating because if you're thinking about, well, internal versus external versus threadless, if you're thinking about verified materials, if you're thinking about different gemstones, different sterilizers, different, sterile gloves or not, or the kinds of needles or, all any of the different things that go into um, a business that's really focused on quality, a lot of clients, if you try to dump all that information on them at once, they get overwhelmed and a lot of
Yeah.
that information might not stick. So I think it is a lot better to have like the bite-sized information of like, here's this one small part of it. And then next time I'll talk about another small part and another small part. And then after a while, clients realize like, I never knew that there was so much that went into it. Of course, I want to go to a studio like this that does all these things to protect my safety and promote quality and all that stuff. Because, yeah, clients aren't going to see it as obvious in a way that, like, I don't want to call you a nerd and have that be offensive, but you seem like
I
a
am, I
nerd
know. It's
when
okay.
it comes to piercing. I really like that. It's it shows engagement and it shows that you care about the difference between this and that. Sometimes clients don't care yet, but if you show them a little bit of that information,
Yeah.
they can start caring and then they understand why they want to go to your studio and maybe not someone else's.
And I mean, when it comes to like in-person client education, I do that a lot, but I don't, just sit there or stand in front of the client, like talking for half an hour. It's like you said, bite sizes. For example, when I'm donning my sterile glove, I'm like, look, now that I'm about to pierce, I'm going to put this, kind of special glove because, everything around the area is sterile. Because, you know, deliver information in a way that clients can actually understand as well.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I see, and I'm not saying piercers who do this are wrong or not, but sometimes like I see piercers posting about different things, but they're not talking to clients, they're talking to other piercers,
Yeah.
you know. So
I see that
especially,
as a huge problem because if you and I have a conversation and we talk about some of the technical elements, I'll understand what you're saying, you'll understand what I'm saying. But if we say those same things to a client, they might not have any idea what ASTM F136 means. So why would I want to use that kind of terminology to them? I'll use other phrases so that they can understand it and they can see what goes into what we're doing.
yeah, that's definitely something that I do when it comes to like in-person interaction with clients as well. Like I said, there is nothing wrong to like designing a Facebook or Instagram or TikTok post to other piercers. I do that too nowadays. I have started, little by little, like I said. um, but yeah, mostly of the educational content that I post at the moment is with my clients and potential clients and the community in general, like the general public, because someone might learn something from me,
Hmm.
and when they go looking for a piercing in their community, they will know what to think about.
Yeah, yeah. So do you use any of like the I don't know what phrase I would say, the older methods of marketing? Like when I started piercing, it was like you take out an ad in the phone book or you have like physical media that you're putting places. And I think now in an age of like, well, it's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's social media and stuff. Like, what do you find is the most effective way to engage with someone who doesn't already know about your studio? Like, what do you do for marketing?
I just post really, but
Hmm.
I don't post randomly.
Yeah.
I try to think like, what is my goal with this post? Sometimes it's just to show a picture of a fresh piercing that I had just done, and that's fine, you know. But especially when it comes to educational content, I try to think like, who is going to actually have access to this information and who is interested in this information?
Hmm.
And how can I get people to become interested in this information? And I mean, there is no formula to that because it will vary a lot, of course, depending on what kind of post it is. But I try to be as inclusive as possible in all ways. For example, some time ago, I made a post about I forgot the name in English now, but about, things that, adults shouldn't believe in, like Santa
Okay.
Claus and,
So
prepaid.
what's the Swedish word for that?
Uh, that's the thing. I do it in English.
Oh, okay.
Most of my posts are, sometimes I post, some things in Swedish, but mostly in English,
Okay.
because I know that, most people in Sweden do speak good English, and then I can also reach other people that perhaps they are not going to be my clients, but that's fine too. And the thing is, sometimes, when we see certain price for piercings and all that, and as professional piercers, we know, like, wait, that's not possible to cover, like good jewelry and, and have like the procedure done in a safe way for that
Yeah.
amount of money.
Right.
So I wanted to bring attention to that specific information. But how can I put that information right out there in a way that people will actually like, huh, I never thought about that before, you know?
Mm.
I mean, that specific post was inspired in another post I seen. Unfortunately, I don't remember where I've seen it, like it was a long time ago. But being able to adapt the information in a way that, will make the message understood is really important.
Yeah, I remember making a post similar to that when I was part of the APP media committee on Tumblr like 10 years ago or something like that. That was one of the questions of like, why are APP piercings so expensive? And I was like, well, it costs a lot of money to have a good sterilizer and to test it and to have good jewelry and to use sterile gloves and to use the proper disinfectants and to have your studio laid out in a safe manner and all these different things carries cost with it. So yeah, you can make a cheaper piercing, but it usually means that the studio has invested less into that piercing. So if you just present it as like, hey, don't be cheap, just pay a bunch of money for this piercing and trust that it's good, that might not be an effective way to communicate with someone. But if you can say, well, this is what goes into it. This is why the piercing costs maybe whatever it costs, all these different things that go into safety and the quality of the jewelry and all that stuff. It really helps people maybe understand it a little bit better and also understand why they might want to make that choice for their next piercing.
I mean, that's a really good point because I think that when it comes to educating clients and potential clients and maybe even piercers, is, how can you make people actually understand and care about the difference between price and value?
Sure.
You because I mean, can it be like really expensive and not good? Of course it can, but how to like balance that, have a reasonable price, and being a good service and a safe service, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I have been doing. I have been working on when it comes to like my town and this area, this part of the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you would want to talk about?
Um, I think we covered most of the subjects that I had in mind, really, and
Okay.
even more. Well, that's
Well,
great. I mean, and I just want to mention, yeah, I don't think you're going to remember this, but one of the reasons why it's so special for me to be in this podcast is because before I opened my own shop, um, it was right when COVID hit, right there, like we were supposed to open in April 2020.
oh,
Yeah, I know. But I had to, go and do something else for a while. And I was working, assembling materials needed for, healthcare personnel back then. And it was really like long, 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 long days, in a factory. And but I had headphones on, and guess what? I was listening to most of the time.
oh, the dulcet tones of the Piercing Wizard podcast.
Yeah, that really helped. You know, helped me stay motivated and focused to remind myself like, yeah, I'm doing this right now. It has nothing to do with piercings, but it's an important job because it was very much needed back then, but also to keep my goal in mind and remind myself of why I was doing that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to it, especially during the pandemic time, because it was really important for me too, because I was one of those piercers who was sitting at home instead of sitting at the shop, bored out of my mind and thinking like, is this the end of body piercing, or is this the end of my career as a body piercer? So to be able to stay engaged with everybody around the world and be able to make some stuff and talk to piercers, that meant a lot to me too. So um, thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you for doing all of this and for, everything else as well. Not just the podcast, but including the podcast.
Well, I'm obsessed with body piercing, and I don't think I would be good at any other job. So I'll stick this out as long as I can.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Well, thanks. You are too.
Thank you. Thank you very
Um,
much.
so you mentioned a couple of times people could reach out and talk to you. So what's the best way that you would want somebody to get in touch with you if they wanted to talk about piercing or a scholarship or anything else? What's your contact info?
Mostly email and Instagram. My Instagram is tf.piercing, and my email is tf.piercing@gmail.com.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know that we've been talking about having you on the podcast for like months now at this point, and
Yeah,
different life things have come up and whatever. So I'm glad that I finally got you on an episode.
yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you very, very much once again.
Well, thanks for making the time, and I'm sure I'll see you at a conference somewhere out in the world soon.
For sure. I'll see
Cool.
you there.
All right. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.